sports. A lot of people, I'm sure a lot of people out there have ran into, especially strength coaches. I mean, I think my athletic trainers went to one clinic and they talked about how bad the glutes were. Am I right? I mean, all the strength coaches are probably hearing that. And folks, I mean, don't get me wrong, the glutes are, well, here's the problem. I had one of my athletes develop let's say a knee pain on the right side, found out that the glutes were weak. Well, they tested weak. Well, here's the problem. This athlete squatted over 600, 275s with 275 pounds with step-ups, and had a butt like a bowling ball, right? And he's a young college athlete, not a big deal. And then they tell me his glutes were weak. I had a hard time with it, okay? So then they spend a month taking this athlete doing bodyweight step-ups to get his glute to fire. That doesn't make sense. So I'm losing my mind. And this is where I came out, and this has been all the glute problems that we've had. My athlete's glutes aren't weak. Your athlete's glutes aren't weak, unless you do no posterior chain work, right? Here was the problem. Chiropractor walked in, put the SI joint back in. The SI joint's out, the glute's inhibited. So how many people have seen it before? Athletes squatting, they go down to the bottom and they shift. How many people have seen that before? Seen it? Folks, you can say it's they can say your glute's not, your glute's not working correctly, don't get me wrong. So if it shifts to the left, the right glute's not firing because this glute's strong and it's pulling everything over. But it's not the glute that's weak, especially on kids. They have ass like bowling balls. It doesn't work. Well, the problem is the SI joint's out of place. Will cause the glute not to fire correctly, okay? So keep that in mind. So what do? Send them to the chiropractor or to somebody that knows how to put it back into place. Now, which, I mean, again, you have any of the strength athletes or my athletes. I mean, I squat most of my athletes during the summer phases 3 days a week, and then they throw, or they do some other type of sport that's twisting. You have to get adjusted. You have to get adjusted. It doesn't work, or you'll have problems like that from day one, and you'll never get your athlete to the highest level, okay? Next slide. Let's go with deep squat bench drops. So pause maybe once he hits the ground. So you'll see this athlete. Okay, pause it. You see the pause? Oh, that's all right. You get it next time. Ready? Boom. He's hitting the ground. He should stop instantly. He hits the ground like a statue. Why? And notice the joint angle. That's for acceleration, okay? Pretty good athlete there. He could stand there and jump on a 60-inch box. I've only had one of those, so. We'll go back to, yep. So then the next progression would be an isometric release box jumps, okay? So how are we going to do it isometrically? We need a person. Stand there, push down, release, explode up, okay? Next progression would be the rebound box jump, double or single leg. We'll go down here. Okay, I'm just giving you examples here of the same thing that you could do. You could interchange these exercises. So then obviously, watch it one more time. It's so fast. Notice how the athlete lands very stiff-legged. Go play it again. And I didn't have the deep one, but you can also do this with the deep squat to work acceleration. What is this working? More top-end phase of running, okay? I don't have the deep squat version, but that's what you would do. Next slide. Depth squat. Depth drop. Yeah, this would be more of a depth drop. We'll play it. Notice an athlete hits. He instantly stops. Toe heel. Again, toe heel and stop instantly as fast as you can, okay? 270 pounds. Next. We'll go here. Well, really, actually, you have the depth jumps. You have weighted isometric squats. You can use your sandbag, and you would pause, and then you would do a standing drop squat jump. So this would be your final phase. You can figure out the pause. So go to the final phase. We're running a little short on time. Okay, see that? Boom. Notice how the athlete is pulling themselves into position, and I'll talk a lot about that tomorrow. Very explosively, dropping. Video's messing up a little bit. But anyway, we'll go on to the next one. Split squat. Let's do the hurdle hop. Let's go to the next one right there. Hurdle hop. Hurdle hop progression. I'll just do 2 exercise progression here. Pause, stop. And then the next one would be a pause, stop, jump. And then The third one would probably be hit, land, and acceleration position. One more time. Again, he's in the acceleration position. He's driving through the ground. Boom. See how reactive that is? It's hit. Don't stay on the ground long. Next slide. You can do repeat hurdle hops. We don't have to worry about that. You could actually see this. I want to make sure I get through everything. But you can see how this progresses. Go to the next slide. Russian plyos is lateral distance. You don't have to hit that. Same concept. One's with a pause. The next one's for distance, and they become more reactive. You can kind of figure that out after you've been through the slides. Next slide. I want to make sure I get everything in. Putting it all together, oscillatory weightlifting improves speed and intermuscular coordination between opposing muscle groups, okay? And includes all three aspects of the triphasic action of high agility and higher velocity in smaller range of motion. Let me give you one example there. We'll go to the next slide. So, for example, the single leg squat, hex bar. Let's go there. Right there. The athlete will pull themselves down and then come up. Oscillate and then come up. Go again. One more time. Again, you're teaching the quads and hamstring to fire correctly between each other. Up and down and then go. Go back to the slide. We'll do this bottom one. Now you'll see a longer progression. Again, folks, this is teaching you can do this with a hex bar or a single leg squat. Boom. And again, I like to have all my athletes finish with one full rep. Helps myelination and so forth. But ultimately, you can see he's doing that movement in the low position and then in the high position to work both qualities, top end speed and acceleration. These are all different things that you can do for speed and performance-based stuff. Next slide. Common problem with, let's say, technique is posture. Cutting with the wrong leg, we'll give you some examples of that. Picking up your feet more than necessary, as we talked before. Touching the line with your hand. For example, I'll give you that example. Shuffling your feet too slow. Technique of the future. Technique is the future to reach new levels, folks. Sometimes you can't do it one-on-one, so you're going to have to pick and choose if you're a college-level coach, but ultimately you need to be able to help your assistants see that. Even your interns see that, okay? Even people that haven't been with you long, you can teach them. Next slide, please. Just make sure your posture is so important because, folks, let me give you the rundown. If I go to change directions and my posture's poor and I'm leaning forward, to change directions I have to swing. If I'm more erect, I can turn much more quickly, obviously. It's simple physics. I don't have to explain it to you. But this is one thing you need to make sure. Folks, don't do excessive core training. When Doc talked about that, folks, the hip flexor training, you do all these crunches in the front, it's going to shorten your hip flexors. Rotates your hips, which is a whole nother problem, okay? So don't too much core training, at least enough core training that doesn't change the anatomical position of the human body, okay? So make sure you're doing the right training. Train your hip flexors in the posterior because, again, it completely shuts off, as Doc said, and that's where I learned it from Doc. Next slide. Make sure you have the right erect position. If you're not back's in a not right position, incorrect, you can't apply forces, you can't move correctly, okay? So couple rules, simple rules. Make sure your athletes don't bend over, don't sit down when they're in the weight room. Make sure they work on their breathing. I see so many athletes. Let me give you one example. It became complicated. A former assistant of mine, I had an athlete with you would say, they thought a sports hernia. But the problem was the kid was a swimmer. So guess what was tight? His lats. Lats were tight, pulled his chest forward. The kid was a chest breather. So you have an athlete like that who breathes a lot, or every athlete, I think it's 10,000 breaths a day. The chest comes up. What happens when the chest comes up? What gets stretched? The abs. Causes the problem down here, folks. Took the shirt off, belly button was elongated. Because this actual athlete was a belly breather, okay? Or a chest breather, okay? So first of all, by doing some soft tissue work on the lats, loosen those up, teaching the athlete to breathe correctly, got his chest back into position. The belly button then, within 5 minutes, became round again, which then got rid of the sports hernia that he had. Hadn't officially been found, but they got rid of it, okay? So again, this position stuff and these anatomical things are very, very important. You have to realize if the body's not working correctly, so when you're doing maybe Doc's lunge progressions, maybe one leg is right and then one it's not working correctly, there's a reason. You just found a reason. They may have no pains yet, but you got to figure out what's wrong. I would bet one of the hips are tilted, and again, it could be because of the SI joint. Okay? So you have to anatomically look at the athlete. You just look at them, you'll see sometimes, folks, shoulders are crooked one way and head's tilted the other. You got problems. Okay? So this side's sending a greater signal than this side. Have you ever, how many people have seen an athlete bench and all of a sudden they bench crooked one day? Could be because the snaps, the travel of the electricity that comes out of the brain to the signals to the muscles is greater on one side because their spine's misaligned. And it's lengthened over here, so the weaker signal. So this arm will be stronger that day than this. I mean, I'm sure we've all seen it. This is why. So you need to go to the chiropractor and make sure you get those things fixed. Next one. Again, I'm trying to get through everything. Really quick, folks, keep in mind, back squat. When Doc's talking, and I term it a sport back squat. If you look at my programming, there's sports back squats. I know a lot of people don't like to squat like this, but he's correct. My feet are underneath me when I run. My feet are underneath me when I jump. Should you not wide back squat? No. My athletes do both. As I get closer to the performance phase, I narrow my stance up. Then what do you need to know? If I'm squatting like this, what's not getting worked as much? Posterior chain glutes, hamstrings, you need to work those more. That's how your programming changes and evolves. So I'll start most of my year with a wider back stance, back squat, more maybe Olympic or maybe even power. We'll switch back and forth. It depends on the athlete. And then we'll go to a more narrow stance. I even have 6'7" guys, narrow stance back squat, because it's a greater transfer to sport. As Doc said, it's a greater transfer to sport. So then all these drills, folks, keep in mind as you progress these, at least do the reactive stuff, minimum 2 weeks, but the sports back squat I like for 4. The jumps that I showed you, at least for 2 weeks to perform at the best results, okay? So as you progress something, you want to do the most reactive ones, the hit and goes, the reactive exercises at least 2 to 4 weeks to get the highest optimal results from them. Now, elite humans, and understand maybe I've had 8, sometimes I say 4, but those were really elite, but maybe 8 or 10. And I understand I get hundreds of new athletes every year with my staff and I. You may not need to do some of those. You can see the athlete do it, and he's so good at it, don't worry about it. Go to the reactive stuff, and he's pretty good. So then all you have to do is worry about doing the reactive stuff. So it's your coaching eye when you're coaching somebody one-on-one. I don't know when I'll do that next. I mean, I have 40 professional hockey players last summer that trained with us. We really don't work with them one-on-one. We work with them in groups. We'll see things. I think the next one I got scheduled, hopefully, he's 5 right now, and I'll be working with him. Okay? He's only 5 years old, but I'll be working with him, but my wife says I have to. So it'll be my son. But obviously, maybe I'll progress him and I'll coach him one-on-one is what I'm saying. Who knows if he'll be elite. But ultimately, when you get to that level and working with athletes one-on-one, I don't get paid to work with them. Many of you probably do, so you could probably progress athletes, but you can see these progressions and you can see what an athlete needs. After you get a couple of them, you'll say, well, this probably athlete doesn't need it because of this, or you can just watch the movements. That's coaching. Next slide. You can see bad cuts. Folks, Doc gave me all of these I wanted to show you. Look at these bad cuts. Make sure that these techniques don't, when they're doing agility drills, you can see. Next slide, obviously. Picking your foot up too high, wasted movement. Picking your feet up too high, wasted movement. You'd be much quicker without it, okay? Keep it close to the ground. This is actually a good technique, cutting on that inside. You all see it, but folks, you watch sports and you will see how much bad technique takes place. Go. Driving with the hips, the forces are going up, should have more forward lean. Pushing through the hips, not very good. Again, I got all these from Doc. Obviously, you can see he should be cutting on the other foot, and then you can see with that particular cut, he's slipping. You can see the turf coming up. Next slide. Whew. I mean, this is bad, and this was in a magazine, okay? All right, next slide. I mean, see the foot coming up? And some of these could be situational, but ultimately, if he had more forward lean, but he might be getting pulled back, but again, he doesn't need to lift the foot up, okay? I mean, yeah, this drill right here, I mean, it's not necessarily, folks, understand, pick your feet up when you're running through the line so an arm tackle doesn't get you. But after that, you don't need it before the line, okay? Pick your feet up when you're going through the line so an arm tackle doesn't get you. by the laces, but everything else, you don't need to. Next slide. Okay. Pro agility. Folks, do not do what the pros do. Look, I know when you teach pro agility, I know a lot of coaches will teach pro agility. I love pro agility. I do it all the time. But like coaches will have you start here and come over, touch the line. I don't have my athletes touch the line unless they're getting ready for a pro agility test. Then I have them touch the line. It's not like you don't touch the line in sports, folks. So just run the drill without touching the line. Why would you slow them down? I have a female athlete that runs a 4.28 without touching the line, okay? Because she's progressed. If I had her touch the line all the time, she wouldn't be as fast. But, so don't do what the pros do. Just because they run pro tests, now if you're getting an athlete ready for the pro combine, yeah, teach them touch the line. But don't do things that don't make sense and you don't do in sports. Next slide. Okay, and this, folks, this is great. If you get this, if you email me or I'll send it to Jay, but you can click on here. Here's a speed and quickness thing article. Folks, this does not make you better and faster, okay? When in sports does any athlete do that? Come on, have you ever seen a sport that they move their feet like that? No, it may be, but they're better at dancing than, okay? Now, there's times to use it. Yeah, I still use it, but I don't bank on it, and it doesn't work. Cone drills really make you better, faster, okay? That's when you move like you do in sports. This doesn't work. Okay, next slide. Again, you know those little mini hurdle hip flexor drills? They're a waste of time. They're not really the best thing, okay? Running through the bags, you know what I'm talking about? Again, teach you the wrong mechanics. Drills that don't mimic the actual speed of the game. You know, you may progress them, but if you're doing the same drill 12 weeks later, they haven't gotten better. They may get better to drill, but it's not moving the speed of the game, you're wasting your time. Next slide. Really quick, offensive linemen need to do about 80% of the acceleration stuff. Defensive linemen are in the 10 to 20% needs to be top end speed. And I just broke this down for football. You can relate. I'd say hockey's more in this thing. Okay, maybe track in this one. But ultimately, you know, your running backs maybe 60 to 70 and 25 to 40% top end speed. Receivers and defensive backs, I would say their progressions of those exercises for acceleration versus top end speed that I mentioned would be 50-50. Next slide. Guidelines for some of my speed training. I'll get right to this, folks. I call it biometric regulation training, using a 3 to 5% drop off. I had an athlete at the beginning of summer, ran a 2.67 at his best time, and then we had an electronic device timing this 2.67. So he kept running 20s electronically until he hit over 2.8, and then we shut him down. He kept doing that 2 days a week, and that's using a percent of drop-off, basically 3 to 4%. And we would have them, at the end of the summer, his best was a 2.58, 20, and this is not a running athlete, and he ran 22, he dropped off a 10th, he ran 22 of those before he dropped off the 10th, okay? So this is auto-regulation training. When I say that is, again, we're training him. How did I know 6? Because I gave him a drop-off percentage of 1/10. He keeps running those, and by the end of the summer, he hit 22 at the highest quality, below, if you look, below his best time at the beginning of the summer, okay? So all these exercises can help transfer and to get results like that, and that's part of my biometric training, which I'll touch briefly more on it at the tomorrow at the other thing, so at the other talk. So anyway, next slide. Other considerations, factors, shifting of the hips. If they up and down, folks, you have issues. You got weak hips. Rotation of the hips. So when athletes running, if their hips rotate, they got weak glutes. Same with walking too. You'll see it in a lot of females. Okay, rotational factors, exercises, videos must be used. Doc used a lot of videos to learn this over the years. You must really sit down and look at videos. Tempo training, eccentric, isometric, concentric are all factors. Arm movement and running are very important. You need to work, have a sound understanding of that and the order of exercises. Next slide. Just my references. We'll probably turn the lights on. Does anybody have any questions? I know I threw a lot at you, and I gave you stuff that hopefully you can go home and start programming Monday morning. Now, you just don't have to use it in here. Folks, you can use this in any different movement. You just have to make up exercises. As Doc said, there's too many exercises to list, whether it's be baseball throwing, football, whatever it may be. Okay, for example, in the football, when the football athlete goes to cock his arm back, the harder you can pull it back, the greater stretch reflex to throw forward. So what do you need to train? You need to train the posterior of the shoulder to become more explosive and pull the arm back faster even. Yes?
Now, when you're doing all these techniques, especially with all this speed, are you trying to do 3 sets of 10, or are you trying to increase the amount of weight that they have?
I use, I wouldn't go with weight because, was that, you can finish? Yeah, okay. I wouldn't go with weight because then you, again, what happens? You slow the human up. You can go with more weight when you're trying to get strong, but once you get strong, you have to transfer that strength, okay? And then sets of 10, well, the rule of thumb I always use is I just watch exercise, and once it starts to slow down, then I throw it out, okay? So really I find that between those exercises, 4, 5, and 6 reps is it. Now if you want to do 10 sets of 4, 5, and 6 to really get some training in, sure, you can do that. But ultimately, that's not going to, that's, again, speed is king when it comes to this. You have to think quality, you have to think speed with these types of exercises, and that's all you worry about. So as a coach now, if you have an athlete that's good, he may, or let's say he has high work capacity, he can do 10 reps. Most athletes can't do 10 reps because they won't keep the speed up because they don't have the work or fitness levels, okay? Any other questions? Yes, Coach?
Are your athletes actually running during all these progressive stages of training?
Yes, they're still running. Yes, they are.
During your eccentric phasing, how do you handle their running with, I know eccentric training is a lot of
Stiffness, yep.
So how do you handle the rest associated with the volume of running you do?
I feel that they're sore. I'm not, and I do it with non-running athletes too, so you know what? You got to crack a few eggs and make an omelet. So if you have a hamstring problem, you may, but I find that it takes, before I do my eccentric, I spend 6 weeks getting them ready for that. So that it's not like they're untrained. I can't walk in week 1 and do all my eccentric training. I spend 6 weeks getting them ready, building their fitness levels, getting them ready to handle that, training their hamstrings for what's going to take place. And then, yeah, you're right. They're walking up steps funny. They're doing a lot of that. I mean, but you know what? They still need to get going. All right? You need to apply stress. That's one thing I do. Folks, I overtrain my athletes, all of them. I overtrain them. You know why? Because during the academic year, I'll have 6 weeks of training, then they get a couple weeks off, and then do 8 weeks of training, a couple weeks off. So I just overtrain them, and then when they're gone, I don't have them do anything. They recover and rest. Okay, that's as simple as that. The only way you can become as good as you want to be is overtrain like a madman. Okay, I mean that's to reach the highest levels. I've never seen elite athletes not do anything other than overtrain. Then you got to recover, obviously. So, but yeah, Coach, it's something to be aware of. You can't do it day one, but I progress in 6 weeks, and then I start some really heavy eccentric stuff. Because if you heard a previous talk of mine, triphasic, I'll try to put it on YouTube. Maybe you can look it up. But ultimately, it's 6 weeks before that, and then once they go for the eccentric, it's pretty stressful. There's no doubt about that. So, any other questions? Yes, Coach.
Your reactive elastic work and all your, how do you program? You work hand in hand with your track and field staff, so your sprinters, your jumpers, your throwers, and how do you program that throughout the year when you're doing your reactive work and then doing your specialty for the rest of the work?
With them on that, okay, with that particular team?
Exactly. They're
Yeah.
doing a lot of SPP, they're doing their jump, they're doing
Right. So with my other teams, I don't worry about it. I just progress. I know where they're at in the year. With those, so if Coach and I talked and we want to do a lunge series, then he knows that, again, well, let's say it's a 400 runner. I mean, if I'm doing 3 sets of that reactive lunge, man, that kid's got so much work capacity, he can roll. He's still rolling in practice, so I'm not so worried about it. And again, the progressions will kind of take care of if it's very reactive and it's very stressful, but the progressions take care of that and build the athlete up for that. So, just here's the thing. As long as you're aware and the coach is aware that you're doing it, and if something comes up, then you may have to back off because, again, my athletes and your athletes aren't there to lift weights. We have to realize that. None of my athletes probably like lifting weights as much as anybody in here because you're all here and they're not. I mean, they don't care, okay? My best athletes just come in, do what I say, never question what I do, and then they get the best results, right? Now, I'm not being egotistical, but when they start questioning what we do, then they start thinking there's something better, and then they don't train hard, right? The best athletes we've ever had, you would think that bar just dropped on their family and killed everybody because they hate it that much and they go after it, okay? They train like their life depends on it. So the ultimate I guess, is you just have to be in touch with your coach, make sure your athletes are working hard, obviously, but as long as he knows, and they change the schedule accordingly, because you know how complicated it is to intertwine your coach's schedule and yours. I mean, I'll blow him up on Tuesday. Well, he didn't tell me he was going to do flying hundreds or 90s or whatever, and well, I can't do that on Tuesday, coach, then. So you obviously know the ins and outs of that. So anything else? Okay, folks, like I said, my next talk will be a very detailed programming talk on a very new method that we use. We came across this year. It won us a few Big Ten titles. It helped us, kids hit lifetime PRs for speed and transition. It's more detailed on this stuff, but it's all basically weight room based. So we'll talk more about that in the afternoon.